Welcome back to another COCOVILLE Tuesdays. Here we are again. I know we missed last week, but we're here now, and that's what matters. So I figured this last kind of area between the city and the current highway would be a good spot to kind of basically, well, the main goal of this, which I'm sure the title says, is just we want to get to Metropolis. Or, yeah, is that it? Or is that the place Superman lives? I can't remember. But whatever, the last level. So I figured this area would be a good spot to just fill with a lot of residential, which, I mean, we're not super far off 63, so we need 12, 13, 12, 12. We need to get to 75,000. My brain works good. So yeah, I figured I'd put this area with 2 highway access points, and then I figured, just because of me wanting to have that circle in the middle, I figured, well, I'll just put it kind of separated in 4, but I didn't want to have it kind of blocked off. Like, I didn't want each of the quarters to not have access to the other quarters. So I came up with this idea where we have the circle in the middle, but over top of that, we have 4 bridges that connect the 4 areas. And then, yeah, just filling in these spots. I used a different design in each area. Each one of those designs I think I've used in different parts of the city already. So this spot, couldn't get the bridge to work just because of how the train kind of auto leveled when I put the highway through there. So, okay, well, I probably should, turn the volume off on my phone like a good content creator before I start recording, but it's fine. So we had to use a bridge on this one. Or, no, tunnel instead of a bridge. I think it still works out fine. These also help with just pedestrian movement. That way, they're not forced to take cars to go, because that roundabout in the middle is technically a highway, so they won't walk on it. So these bridges let them go around instead. So yeah, the main goal of this was to have just residential, but I knew that would just be too much, so I figured, well, I'm near a road or a highway, so this would be a good spot to just have all the gross stuff that you don't really want. Like, you don't want anything to do with garbage. You don't want crematoriums or anything like that pollute rated with your cities. So I figured I'd just put them on the other side of the highway. That way they still have good access and stuff like that. And they worked out pretty well as well. And then it just came to putting schools. I went with 2 high schools, 4 primary schools, 1 university, and I think 2 public libraries. Yep. Which might be a little overkill for the area, but considering everybody that comes to the city has no education whatsoever, you kind of need it when you're doing what I'm doing here, which is just, if you hadn't noticed, I have it on pause, and then I'm just building all of this, zoning all of it, and then basically unpausing it. So it brings a lot of people in really quick, which just overloads the schools. I tried to get the bus routes. Basically, what I wanted was all of them to go to that road just north of the roundabout there, because I put a metro there as well. So basically, anyone that gets on the metro or gets off of the metro can just take a bus to whichever quarter they want, or vice versa if they're trying to get to the metro. I don't know why it always makes me yawn when I do this, but yeah, so we just continue on the loop that we already had. It was a little tricky just because I also had a not a metro, but an actual train loop, and it got a little frustrating. You can see it lined it up perfectly, but it was 1 level too low, so it wasn't actually connected, which is useless to me, but the game said, hey, that's a good idea. So we connected back up, just continuing on the same 2 loops going in opposite directions. And then yeah, I still have a couple of these unique buildings that I haven't gotten yet, but some of them are really specific cases where you kind of have to just more or less ruin your city to get, like the one where you need super high unemployment or high crime rates or stuff like that I just don't want to do, because you basically have to ruin your city and then try and get people to come back after, which is just a bit of a pain. So I carried on with this. I tried to get as many paths in between just so pedestrian traffic can do its thing as much as possible. And the bridges help connect the quarters more or less, but I wanted to connect the quarters to the three main roads there, and then just in between themselves as well. And it ends up working out pretty well. It's definitely a lot easier when you can just plan it out ahead of time like this and just do a whole big area, get all the infrastructure, everything else. But like when you start, you can't afford to do that. So you kind of have to just piece it together. But I think this worked out pretty well. And then just adding parks to try and cover the whole area, and also using them to try and get all the areas on kind of the outskirts that are already developed that didn't quite have the best land value. I put a couple more parks that just to try and help bump them up as well. Like you can see those ones by the highway there. And again, worked pretty well. Put another parking lot just because I like parking lots in terms of aesthetics and like realistic looking stuff, I guess. But yeah, so I figured bottom right would be entirely high density, commercial right down the middle because it has good highway access and stuff like that. And then along the edges where it's maybe a bit noisier and you wouldn't want houses. And I also figured across the street or across the highway there, I would do a little bit. I put offices on the north side just because we already have, we already have some offices on the north side that have pretty high land value and services and things. So I figured, well, I'll just put more there. Then I want to put a little bit more low density, just to mix it up a bit so it doesn't look as kind of big, I guess. And that bottom left corner, just because of the terrain, I couldn't really put a lot of roads anyway. So low density kind of works out a bit better. And then yeah, the top right there ended up being a bit of a mix. Some office, some high density, a little bit of commercial. But overall, I was pretty happy with kind of the mixture, and it covered, I'd say, all of the demand and then some, because you'll see once I unpause it here, the demand bars are just going to shrink right down to nothing. And I basically just had to watch these all have no power until eventually they joined up. I did end up having to put some overhead power lines just for the sake of speeding it up so people wouldn't abandon them and things like that. But eventually it does kind of cover itself, and then I got rid of most of the power lines that we had sitting around. But yeah, so that pretty much covers all of the, what I would say, big bare spots in the city, based on just where we have the highways and things like that. This was one spot that really just looked improperly empty. And then I made each of these a district for no real purpose other than just kind of for looks, I guess. They're all little neighborhoods on their own, I suppose. So, and then yeah, the area on the other side of the highway I just stuck on there too. I didn't really. I looked through to see if there were any other policies that would kind of benefit any of the individual ones, but there weren't really any that really needed it. So I just left it. And then just going along and trying to soundproof the highway as much as possible. Although I realize now that I didn't soundproof the actual roundabout itself, so that should probably be done. But yeah, just anywhere where we now own the highway, just getting it soundproofed as much as possible. Because yeah, when we started, we didn't have any of this, right? So yeah, it fills out quite well. We do end up with more fires than I still think is right. I mentioned like a couple episodes back now that they updated the fire mechanic because it wasn't working at all, and I still think they overtuned it a bit. But yeah, you can see this area fills out pretty well. We've done the majority of the work for this episode already. Now it's just a matter of watching. I do end up having to change the buses because well, you'll see they end up really, really overloaded. But yeah. So yeah, we hit the demand for residential and industrial / office really well, but you can see there is still some demand for commercial, which is just craziness. But here's a couple of shots. I just wanted to see what it looked like with that area kind of filling out, and I think it does a good job of. We have like the super high density center around that little lake thing, and on the coast, and then it kind of just dissipates out to be lower density outside of that. Still not a massive city by any means, but I kind of like that. Like, if I really wanted to, I could have just made this a massive grid and just made it all high density everywhere and just called it a day at that. But I like them to have some looks to them. And here I tried to be smart by putting basically just this one area needed it using bus lanes. But for some reason, you can see by the metro, it's still kind of bumped out the curb, so the buses would have to come out and then go back in to the bus lane, and it still kind of block things. But yeah, you can see all these buses, they have like hundreds of people. That one has 500 at one stop, so I needed to switch to the articulated buses, so I had more capacity. And then just trying to change the colors. I know there's more than 21 colors in existence, but I can't pick them. They all end up looking the same, no matter which color comes into my brain. There's always one that I've already had. But yeah, you can see we have a lot of pedestrian traffic, which, I mean, in a way is good because it means that the bus system that I put in is working, and that's a lot of cars that aren't on the road, I guess. But it is still pretty backed up. I don't know if I get it perfect by the time this episode finishes. I don't think I do, but it works enough. And then looking at the schools, they were getting pretty much filled right off the bat. So I do end up just bumping up the budget for it because here it is now. The budget doesn't really change much anyways, but yeah, all of the schools were already full. So at least for now, the budget needs to go up, and then I can kind of bring it back down later on. And then yeah, I realized here cars are parked there, and it's because it's not the right kind of road. But I don't know if you noticed it here, but I just messed up everything really, really bad. And I'll let you see if you figured it out. If you did, put it in the comments. Let me know. But yeah, trying to figure out why these lines now would not work. It messed me up for a little while. And of course, it didn't help that the bridges were covering it. But yeah, those 3 roads that I put in, I accidentally put in one ways, and all of them were pointing towards the circle. So if you went into that circle, the only place you could go was onto the highway, basically. Which was not ideal. And none of the buses were working, but I ended up fixing them. And then, yeah, we had the issue where as you came into this spot, the bus lane stopped existing, so all the buses were getting in the way again. And then we hit, Megalopolis. That's, yeah, Metropolis is where Superman, yeah. So yeah, we got Megalopolis. Look at all those people going over that bridge. I like to see people, you'll love to see it, people just walking instead of everybody being in cars, because it means your infrastructure and your path systems and stuff like that kind of work. Which is really nice. But yeah, that's pretty much this area, and that's pretty much this episode. And honestly, that might pretty much be this series. Let me know if you want to keep going. I'm thinking of just doing, next episode is just, yeah, you can see fire spreading. Next episode, just being like the dynamic camera where you're driving around the city and stuff like that. Just so you can kind of see all the little details and things like that. Because yeah, I don't know if I want to really push the city too much further. I could do some like beautification stuff, but just doing an episode every week is kind of a little tricky for me. But that's about it. So let me know what you think. Thank you. Bye.